1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey there, so I'm jamming along with this 2-5-1 progression Jamie Aebersold play along book. I'm pretty sure most of you, if you're watching my videos, at least if you're following my channel, if you're new, welcome. But if you're following my channel, you're aware of Jamie Aebersold. They've been around since the 70s. This is from the 70s, and then I think there's a newer edition where there are 2 CDs. Obviously, Aebersold have had a huge impact on jazz teaching, probably done more than anybody else actually for jazz teaching, spreading it around the world. And there are tons of these Aebersold play-along booklets, and he gets quite a lot of criticism, which I think is unfair. I might talk about that later on in the video, but this is the 2-5-1 progression. I used to have this book when I was learning to play jazz. So this is for those of you, it's for all instruments, but I'm addressing guitarists. This is for those of you who know how to play. You're a good player, but you're kind of new to jazz improvisation and it's a mystery to you. This is a really good book. But it could also be for the more advanced player because you can use this book. And I'll try to show you how you can use this book if you're an advanced player as well. It talks about the 2-5-1 progression. So the 2 chord of a key, going to the 5 chord of a key, going to the 1 chord of a key. This chord progression is all over the place in jazz tunes, especially if we're talking about like American songbook kind of tunes. It's actually a little bit overrated. Some teachers say that it's everywhere, but it's quite a lot of jazz tunes don't have 2-5-1s in them actually. And it's also different kinds of 2-5-1s, some short and long. This book talks about the long, but I'm already ranting too much. Let's get started, shall we? The first play along is a bunch of 2-5-1s in different keys. It goes through the different keys. Starts C major, 2 times each. So D minor, G, and then it goes down in whole steps. So now it's C minor, F, B flat. And so on. So here's B flat minor. So 2-5-1s moving down in the whole steps. Different ways you can attack practicing soloing over this chord progression. Starts off with just super easy. So this is great if this is new to you. So obviously you need to be able to read music and understand chord scale theory, how notes relate to chords and that kind of stuff. So we're just gonna play the scales going up. So D, E, F over the D, G, A, B, and then C. So this might seem a little bit silly, but you want to make sure that you can do that. So again, now we're talking about beginners a little bit here. Beginners to jazz. So it would sound like this.
2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Obviously you don't play jazz like this. We're practicing. And then it gets more difficult. So 5 notes going up. Here's another one. kind of like those Coltrane patterns. I like to think of them as Coltrane patterns. Then maybe the whole scale. Arpeggios. Arpeggios going up to the ninth. And then it just continues like that. Just a bunch of pages. So I'm not gonna give you everything, right? I wanna keep something secret. But you could play a pattern like this. Or this one. Now we're getting into more kind of licks. So they get progressively more complex, which is a really good idea to do it in steps like that. But these all start on the first pages. They all start on the root of every chord, or at least of the first chord. Here's a Charlie Parker sounding pattern. Let's try that one.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Then there's 2 more pages of patterns like this. That's a nice one. So these are like 2-5-1 licks. Then it starts on the third of the chord. Let's listen to that. So now we're gonna start on the third of the chord.
4.
Next key. So if you go through this process and practice going through all the 12 keys there, maybe you'll find that certain keys are problematic for you. You're struggling with certain keys. You want to mark that down, because then that's what you need to work on. Maybe you're having a hard time playing a 2-5-1 in G flat. You need to work on playing 2-5-1 in G flat, because if you play jazz standards, they're gonna be 2-5-1s to G flat all over the place. And you need to master that, because otherwise you have a handicap, right? If you can play in certain keys, but every time there's a certain key and you're struggling, yeah, you're not gonna be able to improvise as freely if you're not mastering every key. Then it starts on the fifth of every chord and different patterns with that. I really like that one. So now let's say that you are more of an advanced player. Today we have apps like iReal Pro, so you could argue, well, we don't need the Aebersolds anymore. Well, it's nice to play with real musicians as opposed to this kind of generic sounding robotic play along, but obviously you can do a lot with iReal Pro that you can't do with this. You can change tempo, you can speed it up as you're practicing, you can change key, change the time signature. But let's say I want to practice these patterns over a more difficult situation. So let's do Cherokee. That's a challenging tune. And I'm going to pick a fairly fast tempo. I found a pattern that I really like here. Starting on the 5th. It reminds me of something, some player that phrases like that. I can't think of it, but I'm going to try to play that over Cherokee. So anytime there is a 2-5-1, I'll try to throw in the pattern. B section. So this could be more challenging for you, right? Rather than playing along with the 2-5-1s, if that's too easy for you. So maybe speed it up to a faster tempo. So that's if you're more advanced. Take these patterns and use them over more fast or more difficult tunes, so you can use your iReal Pro. I'm assuming most of you have iReal Pro. If you don't, you really need to get that app. It's a life-changing app. But having said that, celebrating this app, I still feel that the swing feel is awful, so you don't want to practice that too much. And the good thing about this play along CDs, or some of them, I think they have made downloads audio with some of the Aebersolds, is that you're actually playing along with real musicians that have a great swing feel. Namely, on this, it's Aebersold himself on the piano, even though I think he's a saxophonist, if I'm not mistaken. It's Tyrone Wheeler on bass and Jonathan Higgins on drums. And some of these play-alongs have very, very well-renowned musicians on them. I think Ron Carter playing on some of the Aebersolds, if I'm not mistaken. So obviously it's not the same as if you're playing with these people if they were in the room, because there is no interaction. But at least you're playing along with real swing and people who are playing together the way jazz is supposed to be played. Then there's a couple of pages where he focuses more on the more advanced dominant scale. So on the dominant chord you can play diminished material, right? Like the half whole, or you can play altered material. I have plenty of videos where I compare the different chords that you can use over dominant chords. So different scales, I should say, that you can use over dominant chords. So here's a pattern using the diminished scale. not just play the scale descending? So like this. Here's another one. There it is. Oh yeah, of course. This is a really good one, very Schofield sounding. So it's actually starting the scale already on the 2 chord, which you can do. You can always, in a 2-5 situation, kind of ignore the 2 chord and treat everything as this dominant. And back in the day, it used to be just dominance. The 2 chord kind of came later. So this is a symmetrical diminished pattern, right? Here's another one, very standard, cliche. So there's a bunch of those licks, or it could be a whole tone scale for the dominant chord. Also just go up the scale, but ascending, or something like that last one was actually not in there, but it's maybe the most common whole tone pattern. So you might say, well, this sounds kind of silly, but imagine being able to do that over Cherokee and 280 beats per minute. Can you do that? Some people can. So yeah, we need to address this issue, right? That some of you are protesting now, and I've always end up talking about this in a lot of my videos, that what we're doing right now, we're not improvising. We're just learning patterns, preconceived patterns, and cliche ones as well on top of that. And the students sometimes they kind of shy away from that because they feel that it's going to make them sound like everybody else. Then they make the mistake of thinking, oh, I shouldn't practice this stuff. Yes, you should. So I always compare it to learning a language. Like right now I'm trying to learn how to speak French, and I can't improvise speaking French because I don't master the language yet. I have to learn standard phrases like hello, how are you, and what's the weather today, and stuff like that, and I have to repeat them over and over until they become second nature. Then one day, if I practice the language and speak it enough, I will hopefully be able to just speak, which is to improvise. So I always compare jazz improvisation to a language. Now, having said that, do some people never practice this stuff? Yeah, there's some people who would never practice this stuff. But for me, it's been really helpful. So the idea is that you learn all this stuff so that you can do things with it, so that you can play around with these phrases. But you have to learn them first in all over the fretboard. So don't get obsessed. Some people, let's say I take a pattern. Charlie Parker lick, right? And then I moved the same fingering down, and they think that you have to come up with a different fingering every time. No, don't worry too much about that. I would say at some point you're gonna have to change position because you're gonna run out of fretboard. So you're gonna have to change the fingerings anyway at some point, but you don't have to come up with the 50 different fingerings for every lick. That would take forever. Now that could be a point in practicing like that, but that's a different practicing session. Learning how to play stuff in as many fingerings as possible, that's something we kind of struggle with as guitar players. We can play this. You know, have you seen the Jonathan Kreisberg video where he plays the same phrase all over the fretboard like that, and it's like, this is why guitar players go crazy. Other instruments don't have that problem. Maybe violinists, I don't know. But I'm kind of pragmatic about it. I know that I'm gonna, if I find a fingering that I like for a certain lick, I'm probably gonna play it like that. So I practice the way I'm probably gonna play it. But it's also good to every now and then try to break finger habits and do something that you normally wouldn't do. But that's not what I'm trying to do right now. Right now, I just want to make sure that I can play these licks in any key, over any tune, without problem. That's what I'm trying to do now. It also does the whole same thing with the minor 2/5s, but I'm not gonna do that right now because I don't want this video to be 5 hours long. But the next chapter here is altered, because the altered scale and altered sound requires extra attention. So now we have a chord progression where there's altered chords going to a tonic. So it's alternating between resolving to major chords and minor chords. So the first chord progression is just E7 altered to A major 7. And then you have to kind of start with only a few notes. So maybe like that. And then it's C to F, and this time it goes to minor. So 1 flat 9 1, 1 flat 9 sharp 9 flat 9 5. And then adding some more notes. So you just, instead of trying to swallow the whole scale at once, take it in smaller increments. You have to get used to these extensions, these altered extensions, the flat 13s and the flat 9, the sharp 9 and all this stuff. Here's another one. Like that.
4.
Here's one that starts on the flat 9. So now I need to find the flat 9 on the next chord. So there's also introduces just a few notes and then gradually introduces more and more until you're playing the whole scale. But you need to get used to these, the ears need to get used to it if you never played the altered scale before. So that you're not just learning a finger patterns, because it doesn't really work with these complex scales. You need to be aware of the extensions and stuff like that, and I've talked about that quite a lot in my videos. It's also an ear training thing, like, so let's say the last example you started on a flat 9. No, do, 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 dee, do, 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 do. You need to find that note. No, do, 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 dee, do, dee, do, do. If you can, that's the point I keep making in my videos. If you can sing it and know what the notes are, you're gonna be able to find those notes. So another thing is that when, let's say, you have an E7 altered, I think of the E, F is flat 9, G is sharp 9, A flat is actually the flat 4, but I think of it as the major third, and then the flat 13, sorry, flat 5, flat 13, flat 7. But let's say I play E flat altered. For me, it's easier to think E melodic minor. So I'm thinking E melodic minor. Sometimes I'm thinking of the melodic minor half step up. And in other cases, I actually think of the altered notes as they relate to the chord. So, for example, if I have a D flat altered, it's easier to think D melodic minor, right? Because otherwise it's like, what is it? It's D flat, and then it's a E double flat, F flat. It's like it gets too complicated. So that's why you need to spend time with each altered scale on its own until you've mastered them all. You don't try to learn them all at once. Then there are just some other tunes, and then the whole thing again goes the same process with minor 2-5-1s. So there's quite a lot of patterns in here. And then there's some other tunes like the blues with a bridge and a bebop tune. But then the original book from '73 only came with one CD, I guess cassette back in those days. But here we have another CD. So let's see what that is all about, shall we? It feels nice using a CD player again. It's been years. It's like there's nothing wrong with the CD. I guess we stopped using CDs, became too expensive. Alright, so here they're staying on each key. So it's a vamp over just a C major 2-5-1 first. So it's not going to modulate. That was a 6 chord as well. So you can play along with that key over and over, and the next day the next key, and so on and so forth. And then there's some variations on the chord progressions we had on the first CD, but with different feels, like I think it's like a Latin feel and something like that. Now, here comes the element of improvisation. Let's say you think this is terribly uninspiring, which it can be. Some ideas on how you can be more creative with this. So I'm gonna find a pattern that I like. That's a very cliche sounding lick, but I like it. I don't mind the cliches. You might have noticed that when I was showing you the different examples, or in the space, I throw in some fills and stuff where there's space. That's a way of adding improvisation to this practicing. But what you could do is you could decide, I'm only going to play the first part of the lick, the first bar of the lick, and on the second bar, I'm going to do something else. not the lick, but something else. Something like this, perhaps. Or I could do the other way around. Just I'm gonna play something else on the D minor and then try to play into that second bar somehow. Let's see how that goes. I could try to add rhythm to the lick. Maybe try to skip octaves somewhere. I just dropped some of the notes in octave. Maybe try to expand on the shape. The shape is da di u di do da 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 di u di do da 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 da. So maybe same kind of contour, but just wider intervals. So this is kind of just experimenting with different ideas. What if I start a beat late? Another thing you could do is try to play in a different time signature, maybe 5/4. Because the pad is not going to work. I have to adjust it to the new time signature somehow. I think that's the reason why a lot of jazz musicians these days like to play in odd time signatures, because the cliches, they don't work. You have to kind of change them to fit this new time signature. And so that's the beauty of improvisation, right? Like you have to be able to take an idea, if you think of this as an idea, and then play it, manipulate it, and do things with that phrase in the moment. So that's really difficult, obviously. So you want to make sure that you can play the licks really well, and then you can do things with them. So there are some players that are more licks based than others. I personally don't care too much about that. That's not what defines a great player, in my opinion. There's so many things that makes a player great. The timing, the sound, and all that stuff. Also, of course, this is not enough. It's not like this is the secret of jazz, and if you do this, you're gonna sound amazing. But it's really helpful and a great introduction to jazz improvisation. Then you have to transcribe thousands of licks and solos, and then you have to learn from other players. You have to, learn tunes and all that stuff. And there's so many things to learn. But this is a pretty solid introduction to jazz improvisation. It's actually better than I remembered. I remembered that I liked using this book when I was like maybe 19 or so. Then I never saw it until I bought it recently, and it's actually better than I remember. It's really good. So, yep, that was my introduction to the 2-5-1 progression with Aebersold. I should mention also I have this Aebersold turnaround cycles in 2/5s, which is kind of a continuation on this. It deals with the kind of typical chord progressions that you find as on top of the 2-5-1. So 1, 6, 2, 5, and all that kind of stuff. But there is another Aebersold that I wanted to have. I used to teach in Uppsala, and I think the sax teacher there left an Aebersold in the room where I was teaching, and I used, anytime a student did show up, I remember using that Aebersold, and it's really, really good. And I thought it was this, so I ordered it, but it's actually not this one. It's the one called Dominant 7th Workout. So volume 84, Dominant 7th Workout. That's the book I used to have in that teaching room. So I'm gonna order that, and I remember that one being really, really good. So, but this is also good. So I might make a lesson about those two when I have that one. So, as always, thank you for your time and attention, and I shall see you next time.